Thank you so much for joining today. It's a kind of a launch of 256 Web3 network. We've been running it from past 2-3 months now, but we thought let's find a time to officially launch this club. This is something we are trying to build. Just a brief introduction I'm going to give. I'm Dhruv, founder of 256 Network. This network started in 2018 as a small group of investors interested in investing in the Indian alternative investment space. And over the last 3 years, we have gone global. We've gone to like close to 600 members representing 400 plus asset management firms globally. Currently, we are one of the world's largest LPGP clubs. And our members are not only MDs and GPs of every major VC and PE in India and SEA, but also managers across asset classes like public markets, debt, crypto, commodities, and even art. And the membership spans across 27 countries. And cumulatively, our member firms manage over $3.9 trillion in assets. And the aim of this network, 256, is to bring a sense of belonging and trust to asset management and bridge the trust deficit existing today. So this is like a short intro. I'll just intro all the panelists here and then hand it over to Vineeth. So first we have Jaynti, also known as JD, co-founder of Polygon Technologies. Of course, he doesn't need any introduction. Polygon is the most widely used L2 chain in the world today. We have Matthew Graham, co-founder and CEO of Sino Global Capital. They provide strategic investments to best-in-class companies that are moving the blockchain and digital assets ecosystem forward. And some of their major investments are FTX, Layer0, and of course, Polygon. We have Himanshu, Yadav, founding partner of Woodstock Fund. They are an emerging technology investment firm. They invest in early and growth stage distribution, DLT, startups and companies. Some major investments include Arcana, Arnold, Persistence, and Bioeconomy. We have Enzo Vilani, his old friend. He's the CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Alpha Sigma Capital. They are a pioneering digital asset fund focused on blockchain economy and the shift toward decentralized Web3 infrastructure. And since 2020, the fund's investment strategy and approach has resulted in 11 unicorns, if I'm not wrong, Enzo, in 19 months. Some of the major investments include Decentraland, Solana, and Polkadot. Of course, we have Kunal Kapoor, the most famous in the panel. He's an actor, producer, and co-founder of Keto, and working on a Web3 project called Loveabot. Thank you, Kunal. And this panel would be moderated by Vineeth. Vineeth is a principal at SPI Family Office and a moderator for today. We have been investors in more than 20 VC and PE funds in India and US. So, and of course, Vineeth also co-chairs our 256 Web3 Club with us. So that's another thing. I'll hand it over to Vineeth. Vineeth, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dhruv. Good evening and good morning, good afternoon, folks, wherever you're coming from. What we just were talking offline before we get started, let's continue from there, right? And given what we are seeing currently in the market and the environment, how do all of you think, and given some of us have been in the space for a long time, how are you thinking about bringing that long-term vision and thinking into the space, right? And personally, since all of you have been involved in the space in some capacity, during a similar winter last time, how did you manage to do? What were you investing in, and what was actually your experience? Because that might be interesting to hear, right? About both how this thought process can be inculcated and what you personally did last time and how did you go through this phase, right? So let's start with Enzo.
So, one is I do believe in the blockchain economy. I believe in the tech stack. I believe in DeFi will become finance. Technology is just being enhanced and more enhanced with open source and groups and GitHubs and everything. So none of this is going away. In fact, if you look at governments, big banks, institutions, payment systems, everything quietly is becoming DLT'd or blockchain or whatever you want to call it. The kind of tokenization, the entrepreneurship side, I think is very important. I think that's the way we have. I think some of the best technology people in the world are now or have entered the blockchain space. I think we're seeing more developers come into this space than any other, coding tech stack space in the world. So, and of course, there's actually, kind of different groups. There's the Polkadots and the Solanas and so on. And I think that they're doing a great job of building a network kind of capacity opportunity. And we also all understand that, from my side, I understand this is nascent technology and we're trying to push the boundaries. So I don't really get too bent out of shape when things aren't working perfectly. And I come from a place of fintech software building where, there was always bugs in the software at some point. Even the most, extensive software tech stack With open source, I think we get a little bit cleaner because a lot of bugs can get kind of washed out, but then new bugs come in because you also have people who you don't really control. So I get it, right? And I think that's part of the breakthrough. What do I do in this kind of scenario is I go and I speak to companies that I know, like most of my like kind of private equity investments right now have enough runway to make it through what I call the chasm. I believe that we're in the classic bubble chasm right now. I was waiting for it to hit, and with the exuberance that was happening, you knew that something was going to come to bear. It was, it's also the interesting thing is that we're so tied to the stock market, which is a little strange, especially with Bitcoin. And the fact that everyone's running it to US dollars when dollars value is kind of not really as strong as it was, instead of being a bit, that stuff kind of confuses me a bit, but that's market sentiment. But that's where I think we're headed, is that you just have to look at the best companies that you have, and you have to go look at which ones are going to make it through the chasm, which ones can grow during this chasm. There's a lot of like kind of M&A opportunities, roll-up opportunities. So that's what I see, is I would focus on companies that are being pragmatic and not also still drinking the Kool-Aid from 3 months ago.
Himanshu, perhaps we hear your thoughts on this.
So I think at times like this is very important to zoom out and really look at the bigger picture, right? When we talk about blockchain as a technology, we have barely touched hardly 2-3% of the world's population in any meaningful way, right? Some more people might have interacted with it, dabbled with it, invested, etc. But we have not really touched people and the applications in any meaningful way, right? And we are talking about a technology which is so powerful as the financial layer it provides, that it is going to touch more than 50% of the world's population, either by the end of this decade or in the coming decade, right? So we are just in sheer numbers, we are looking at a magnitude of growth. And, I really like this quote by Bill Gates, which says that we always tend to overestimate what the change will be in the next 2 years and underestimate what it will be in the next 10 years, right? So that's what happens, especially in this asset class, because we have much shorter cycles, extreme amount of exuberance and hype that comes in, and eventually things have to like really cool down and crash and cut out the noise, etc. Right? So I think it's very important to zoom out and look at the sheer numbers in terms of what this technology is going to touch at, and we are nowhere close to even getting to those numbers. So as long as we understand the importance of the technology and the fact that a lot of the infrastructure problems are being solved, and application layers have just started to pick up, and still a long way to go in terms of solving the user experience, user interface problems, which I think are a huge pain point in this space. It's not easy to even do basic stuff like managing your assets, forget about using the applications. So I think a lot of those problems will be solved, and it takes time to build. Building happens at its own pace. It doesn't happen at the pace of the market cycles and the movement in the prices, right? So it's important to zoom out and give enough time to the builders to solve these problems and really let the technology do what it has the potential to do. In terms of how we look at this, we always have internally discussed that we love bear markets much more than we love bull markets. That's when you really get the time to sit and talk to the best founders who are in it for the long term, who have the right vision, who have the right pedigree, who are building in the right processes to really build something that can scale and live beyond them as founders. And this is the time you really get to pick and identify those teams compared to bull markets, when you have hundreds of projects knocking at your door every single day, and it's just impossible to see and filter those out. So I think this is the time for any serious person who's looking at this space to really start researching and understanding what the space is about, meet people, talk to people, try to understand how the stack is shaping up, which layers of this whole stack are close to becoming mature, and which are the layers and the use cases that will follow next, right? That's where the real alpha lies in terms of understanding the best opportunities.
So I would echo a lot of the previous comments. We take a fundamentally counter-cyclical approach to investing. I'm much more reticent to invest in very frothy markets, and I feel like we have substantially more margin of error. I'm fundamentally more comfortable investing in this type of environment. The signal to noise ratio is much more favorable. You don't have as many LARPers, so to speak. And fundamentally, also, we are looking to invest in projects that, in the success case, will stand the test of time and will be here 5, 10 years from now, even. And so we're still looking for the same type of projects, but much better margin of error, and it's really a much more comfortable experience. I'm much more comfortable being aggressive in this type of environment as an investor. And then, so fundamentally, we're looking at projects that can solve industry pain points. We've always had the perspective that, for example, with DeFi, we've always had the perspective that financial markets, any financial market, inexorably becomes more abstracted and has more complexity over time. But I think we have an interesting characteristic of DeFi currently, where the sophistication of many of the products actually has gotten ahead of the liquidity available to support the sophisticated ideas. So therefore, we're very interested in products that are adjacent to collateralization, under collateralized lending, automated risk scoring, things like that. Anything that can support either institutional or retail liquidity. So that could be customer experience, great UIs, things like that. Better fiat on ramps and off ramps. For institutional, private borrowing, private credit markets, things like that. We're really looking to focus on serious builders that are addressing real pain points in a long-term way. So I fundamentally like markets like this. I'm much less comfortable in a market that's scorching hot. I don't really like those kinds of markets.
So JD, I mean, you've been through that once and have come out shining, might I say, on the other side. So could you share how you went through, the team went through this personally, and how has Polygon come out so successfully flying colors on the other side from 2018?
Definitely. So I'm not sure like if everyone knows that, but in 2018-19, in the last bear market, we raised funding from Coinbase and Binance, and no one other than them, there was no one giving us a fund. And after that, in 2020, the DeFi summer, right? The DeFi summer came when Polygon started picking up, and Aave deployed on Polygon, and then the whole DeFi summer started, and then NFT came and everything came. So we are kind of pioneers on both the market, to be honest. We were there for both the different kind of market. So in this bear market, what happens is that, whenever the bull market comes, like projects like ourselves grow very, very rapidly, right? So we grew like we were like 30-40 people at the time in terms of people, like employees. We were 30-40 people, and then now like we have 400 people. We had like biggest treasury right now. We acquired bunch of companies in the last bull market, ZK, zero knowledge based companies, and we grew so fast and acquired like many clients on Polygon. So that was really important for us. And now like we are in the different kind of market, we are still seeing that kind of traction in terms of clients and people building on Polygon. But the difference is that now like we are getting like very good projects. Like now we are seeing people who are really interested to build on blockchains and have some clarity on like what they want to build, how they would acquire the users, how they kind of create a product which basically works with a blockchain philosophy and acquire users and investors and see the product market fit there, right? So for us, like, it's a win-win situation for both the market, to be honest. Definitely, we definitely miss the bull market in this case, because like in bull market we don't have to think twice to spend some kind of major deals, if we are doing major deals or doing some kind of grants programs, or spending money on multiple areas to grow. But now, like, we also need to think about those things, but I think that's fine, because now, like, we have better quality of projects. So yeah, I mean, we are happy. And now, like, I'm also seeing like very good projects coming on the investments, and we are kind of doing investments on those projects through Polygon Ventures. So we are kind of happy right now. And now, like, also on the building mode, in the building part, like, we are launching multiple projects under ZK rollups. We are end of this month, end of this kind of year, we will have ZK rollups ready to go. So this is the right market to launch products, so we can also prepare for the next cycle for the growth. Yeah. So yeah.
Thanks, Jenny. Kunal, you bring about a very different perspective as a creator. That is one of the very vital stakeholders in the ecosystem, right? So how are you seeing it, and how are the other creators that you interact with seeing what's happening correctly, and how are they taking this, what's going on?
Well, obviously, like you're saying, I'm an individual. I don't, not like I'm investing in companies and stuff. So I have a different perspective on this. But what I feel is a sense of peace, actually, because I think the last year and a half has been quite crazy, and you're just constantly pulling directions, and, different things are constantly thrown at you, and it becomes very difficult to sort of follow everything. And I actually feel a sense of peace at what's going on in this market. I think, what sort of drew me and draws a lot of creative people into this. I heard something that was very interesting in it. They said that the future will belong to two kinds of people, one that are creating code and the other that are creating culture. And I think as creative people, we understand what it is to create culture. And I see an opportunity which I've never seen before, right? Which is the possibility of creating culture in a much more decentralized way, the possibility of creating IPs in a decentralized way, the possibility of making movies in a whole different kind of way. People have been discussing DAOs to fund films and stuff, and DAOs to come up with movie studios, and I see something very, very interesting there. And I think that has not changed, whether it's a bull market or a bear market. The possibilities are still as immense as they were a month back, right? And like everybody's been saying, is that I think that the noise has been cut out, so you can focus on really what you want to do and what you want to build. And yeah, I just feel like there's obviously lots of challenges still, but as creative people and people that enjoy creating culture, I think there has never been a better time. And like everyone's been saying, is that if you look at this as a sort of decade-long play, as opposed to what's happened in the last couple of months, what's going to happen in the next couple of months, then you'll realize that the potential is immense, and that stays the same. Whether that's 6 months back, or today, or 6 months down the line.
Let me follow what you said with a question to you, Kunal. And if there are specific asks that you might have from the Web3 community or the ecosystem, what might that be that would facilitate to onboard way more creators into the ecosystem, right? We keep talking about creator economy and how Web3 perhaps is that route to onboard creators and so on and so forth. So in your mind, if you were given the choice of setting expectations on behalf of the creator community, right, what would that be to the Web3 ecosystem?
Well, I think there's, like I've been saying, there's immense possibilities that have opened up, and we have seen, when it comes to even artists and stuff, we've seen a lot of artists that would have found it very difficult to break through in the physical world, right? They've managed to break through in the digital world, and I think that's incredible. But I think, all the conversations that I have with the artists a lot of them are also disillusioned with the space, and a lot of them have left the space because I think it's come down to a lot of like marketing and shilling and distribution. And I think as creative people, those are things that most people are not good at, because you're just good at creating art and creating content, but you're not necessarily very good at marketing those, and you're not very good at distributing those. And also there's a sense that this is a market, because the space is still very small and evolving. It's led by a very few influencers, and these influencers sort of decide which project or which PFP project is going to blow up, and it's very easy for them to sort of push the projects that they like or they're invested in, right? So I think that has been a little disappointing for a lot of creators. But like we're saying, that these are very, very sort of early days, and as the adoption grows, as more people come in, I'm sure that these influencers will not have the sort of power that they've had in the last year. The second thing that I think, if there was a way of solving problems for creators, I think the problem that I would look to solve is, how do you make it easy for creative people to market and distribute what they're creating, right? And how do you make it not dependent on a few people? How do you make it easier for them so that they don't have to constantly shill? Because shilling gets very tiring, after a point. You're constantly on Twitter talking about how great your project is, or how it's going to blow up, and you're like, let's fucking go. And you're like, constantly every day you've got to put out multiple tweets about how great you are. And I don't think creative people really enjoy doing that. They just want to sort of create their art and let it speak for itself. And unfortunately, the ones that are letting it speak for itself are not necessarily the ones that are, reaching out to people. So I think if there is a way of sort of creating a marketing and distribution channel for creators, which is more sort of trustworthy and transparent, I think that would be something that's really powerful.
I do agree. It's funny. I come from a kind of a background where I was I went to Pratt, and I was a com kind of designer. I was a UI designer, and then I ended up in M&A, I guess, because I couldn't do nice kind of PowerPoints or something. But what's interesting about what's happening now is, it's like this. It's just a cultural. There's more of a culture around crypto NFT market versus the art itself. I think even the art, it has a bit of a pop art, street art type of approach, right? And that culture seems to be doing quite well. But what's happening is that that's not every artist, right? And I do think the tools. I see the tools are coming. Like, we invested in a company that is in the esports gaming area. The CEO's had like 2 or 3 exits. He was the CEO of the largest esports team group, and now he's joined. And we're going to do a tokenization idea with him on tournaments, and play to earn meets play to tourney, and then you could become a professional potentially. But we're letting him guide us in making sure that we don't crypto culture it too hard, because the problem is that there's 3.5 billion gamers out there. I'll just talk about gaming because this is the only thing that I'm really focused on that spend. But with the 3.5 billion gamers, a lot of them don't like crypto. But then I heard yesterday that EA, someone said this to me, I don't even know where it was, EA is being sold, right, or being potentially bought by Apple. Someone said to me, EA does more transactions than any payment company in the world. And I was like, that was a shocker, right? So I think that I think you're right. I think but I do think the tools are coming. I just think the market has to. I think we needed the market to crash, basically, to be honest with you, so that we can start looking at it again. Like, the hype is unbelievable, right? But I do see some really great ideas around NFTs, around gaming, around these like ASM brains. Like, I love some of the ideas out there, and they are launching real games. I don't know about movies and art, and I do know streaming and all that stuff is happening. And I am based out of LA, so we do get a lot of entertainment stuff that comes our way. But I do believe that somebody has to. We need some people from the traditional market of movie making and studios to get more involved in the crypto space and kind of let's guide it down together. I don't think it's going to come from crypto people as a pure play.
And I think in 256, there's been a very similar traction that we're seeing that Drew can correct me if I'm wrong, but over the last, I think, perhaps 4 to 6 weeks, we've seen phenomenal interest in our Web3 group itself and clubs, and more people have said, when are you launching it, when it's coming, and so on. And on that note, I think 256 in a season of launches. We are doing our Web3 panel today, and in the interest of the community, I would like to tell all of us that our GCC community club is getting launched on June 15th in Dubai, and I'm sure those of you there, please do attend that. Drew and team are likely to put out some information regarding that in the next day or so. So I thought that should come. I think 256 also is in a season of building 256 itself and building Web3. So there are a bunch of these launches happening. Those in Dubai, please look out for, or in the Gulf region, please look out for the notice that's likely to come. And having said that, one thing that as a family office that I see and a lot of entrepreneurs now are looking at, and a bunch of investors here, right? The question often is, hey, which are the subsectors that investors are looking at? What do you recommend, the entrepreneurs to be looking to get focused on? What is the areas of interest that each of you are actively pursuing to invest money? So if you can give us some idea, perhaps starting from, whoever wants to go first can go, but how are you thinking over, has anything changed in your thesis? Is better signal now enabling? How's things changed with better signal now, right? Where would you recommend, or where's your money going to go in the next 12 months, right?
First of all, I just wanted to go back to a few things we were just talking about. I love the quote about the future belonging to two kinds of people, those who create code and those who create culture. So I just wanted to say how much I love that, first of all. And then also I wanted to echo and then maybe more about some of the points that Enzo made. So I think we are leaning too hard into the crypto part of, for example, Web3 gaming. So in my view, fundamentally in the long run, we should just think of it, ultimately in the success case, people will just think about it as gaming, right? They're playing a game and they won't necessarily even be super cognizant about the fact that crypto underpins the game and there are NFT transactions within the game and things like that. They'll just think of it as gaming, right? In the success case. We've seen this in success case, they're going to care about having a product that they love, obviously, right? And right now, I think we're coming at things from a very crypto-centric standpoint, and that leads to very serious problems. And I would put them in kind of two categories. The first category is, if we're kind of being honest about it, most of the games suck. They're not fun to play, right? And I think that's very related to the fact that we're starting from a crypto standpoint instead of a gaming standpoint. And then the economic models surrounding the games, despite their sophistication, they're very reflexive. And what I mean by that is that they are momentum generating as the game community expands, but also momentum generating if the game community were to start to constrict. And as a result, they're very, very susceptible to boom and bust cycles in a very exaggerated way, which we've been saying for more than a year now. And I think we've seen a lot of this now. They need kind of like a constant influx of new players to expand the balloon, so to speak. And if that ever stops or reverses itself, it can be catastrophic. So there are kind of two categorical major problems with the games today. The additional problem, especially in the West, that many major gaming companies are conflicted about crypto. Half of the employees hate crypto, so it's hard to see how, for us, it's very reminiscent of the problems with TradFi companies entering crypto, or even if you go back a generation with why it was so difficult for, a company like Walmart to compete with an upstart like Amazon. Major cultural issues. And so then to come back to the question, which was how do you make investment theses about some of these ideas, and what are some of your investment theses? One of the things that we really are looking for, we view the most successful opportunities are not from when people start with a crypto lens and try to do gaming, and they're not when XYZ Big Co tries to enter the crypto gaming market. Rather, we are very bullish on when people that are enormously successful and sophisticated leave world-class XYZ gaming studio and then open up their own shop or start their own project and do gaming from a gaming standpoint, but then they add the crypto elements. So this is very similar to kind of our overall investment thesis. For example, when we invested in DeFi related infrastructure, we were extremely bullish. We were, I think it's known that we were an early supporter of, an early backer of FTX, for example, and we loved that Sam had the Jane Street background, and then he left and was doing crypto. Or similarly with Wintermute, where we came in at seed, I guess it was, with Wintermute, where they came from Optiver, and which is a world-class market making shop, and then now they were going to do crypto. But we don't believe that the big co's, we think it's too difficult in most cases. It's like when Walmart tried to compete against Amazon. And the crypto people that try to do it from a crypto native place and then do gaming or XYZ, they don't understand the business enough. So we are super bullish on when people have the sophisticated domain expertise and then they want to add crypto in a supporting fashion, but it shouldn't be like necessarily front and center. It should be for specific purposes, the enablement of new features and things like that. And so I just was inspired by the comments just now about Web3 gaming. So I wanted to elaborate a little bit on some of the ways we think. Thank you.
Himanshu?
Yeah, so I think Matthew covered one point really well. Gaming is one of the most, I think, important sectors, which will probably be at the forefront of really spearheading the adoption side of crypto and blockchain, right? Because gamers inherently are digital native people who understand and can adapt very quickly. And it makes, so till now, unfortunately, most of the gaming projects that we have seen till now have been people who are trying to focus a lot more on the token incentive side of things and not focusing on the quality of games, right? But eventually the real success stories will come out of, as Matthew also pointed out, people who come with a lot of game development experience. And when they work with the token economists to create the best circular economies, where it's, you have the stickiness and the engagement factors into the game, while you are creating the best circular economies to really incentivize the long-term behavior of the users. So gaming definitely is, one area that we are also very keenly looking at. Apart from that, the list is actually quite big. There are lots of areas that are very exciting to evaluate in the space. We are very keenly looking at zero knowledge solutions at the infrastructure level, apart from the applications aside, how will rollups on top of layer ones work, blockchains implementing ZK proofs, etc. We are looking at generalized interoperability and composability solutions for a cross-chain future. One of the core parts of our thesis is it's going to be a multi-chain world and a cross-chain world. So there will be a huge and very important requirement for interoperable and composable solutions. On the security side, security and auditing firms for solidity and risk smart contracts, a massive demand that is going to come up on that side with the explosion of all these multiple layer one protocols that we are seeing. So that is a very interesting area that we are looking at. On the NFT side, we are looking at financialization of NFTs, fractionalization of NFTs. How can you lend and borrow NFTs? How can you increase the liquidity across the NFT markets? How can they be used as collateral for loans, etc.? So all of those things, I think, will start evolving as we see the NFTs side of things mature as well. So lots of interesting problems and use cases to look at, and that's why we are very happy that now things are calming down, so you can start to focus a lot more in terms of who are solving these right problems, and you get time to really discuss them in detail with them.
And Kunal, I mean, how are you seeing the community take this up, Kunal? What's the feedback you're receiving? I mean, what's the thinking there currently going?
No, I mean, but I think Matthew, I've been thinking of exactly what Matthew said, which is that the problem with most games is that they suck. And the problem is that most games in the NFT and blockchain space and stuff start with how can we sort of monetize this, whereas most game developers are passionate gamers and they're like, how do we build a great game, and till that sort of the starting point, I think, is incorrect. You've got to change the starting point if you want more people to get involved in gaming and stuff, right? And like everyone's saying, that's the best way to get people to adopt the crypto space. But the starting point in itself is wrong, and which is why a lot of gamers are sort of averse to being part of this, because for them, I'm a gamer and I really enjoy playing games. I'm not looking to play games because I can make lots of money off it, right? I want to play a game because it's great fun to do, and I'm going to spend hours doing it. And when you tell me that the starting point of this is that you can make money, then it becomes something that puts a lot of people off. So yeah, I think the starting point has to change, and I think that's what people have to look at.
So interesting you say it, because I was speaking to a professional gamer and I was asking him, why are you not participating in Web3 as much? He was like, I click to play, I don't click to earn, is what he was saying. Right? I'm just too tired and bored of repetitive clicking to earn, is what he was telling me. And I now empathize with him after hearing all of you speak. So Jerry, you've been actively trying to onboard and get on people into the Polygon chain, right? So how are you seeing this going? Where do you think Polygon's grants, now that you yourself said it's kind of going to reduce, where do you think focus of Polygon grants is going to be? I mean, there are enough builders here that might be interested in accessing those grants. So where's your focus in the next 12 months?
Our focus would be, first of all, we have been seeing a lot of competitions on the L1, L2 space. So definitely our focus would be to keep the leadership positions we have right now in this market. The second thing is that making sure like even if the whole market stays this kind of situation for a longer time, we still we want to achieve whatever we have decided to achieve in the 1 or 2 years, which is like launching the ZK rollups. We have like other plans as well, which we're going to share soon. Those kind of solutions, those kind of roadmap we have, and we haven't changed anything so far. The thing on the grant side, on the investment side, is that we also want to make sure we don't kind of spray kind of model, use that kind of models to achieve the growth. So we would be very much kind of now mindful about where we put our money on. But given that we don't want to slow down our growth, so we will spend our efforts, our focus whenever required, and make sure we keep our growth wherever required. Yeah.
Thanks, Terry. And it's a follow-up to what you just mentioned. And I think all of us have been talking about how essential it is to onboard and perhaps start mainstreaming a little bit of this with getting the domain experts, start adopting and using crypto rather than crypto people trying to get. What is the thinking been behind this announcement, this partnership between Polygon and Meta, right? And I think that is, as a whole, perhaps good for the ecosystem. So how are you thinking about it, or what transpired today?
Yeah, so it does not just Meta. We have been working with many other Web2 companies and big companies to bring them on Polygon and the blockchain itself. So whatever happens, we will keep doing that because that will drive the adoption of the blockchain market in general, right? Currently, like everyone is, as you said rightly, right, that people, only crypto people building something new. Now this is a chance for us to bring non-crypto people and the money itself into the crypto, right? For example, DeFi, if DeFi needs to work, we need more and more capital coming from institutions, Web2 world into the Web3. But with these things, like working with the Meta and multiple other companies, big companies, will solve those problems for us. So it is very important for us. And again, like it is not just a Meta. We have been working with like mostly many Web2 companies, Fortune 500 companies in the world. Yeah.
I have a question, Jaynti, for you, because you also mentioned ZK rollups, and that's something that we are very keenly looking at. And I know Polygon, you guys are building like a suite of ZK solutions. You have Hermes, Nightfall, etc. that you are working on. Which one of these are you personally most excited about and see the most potential in?
So scaling is a very weird problem to solve, to be honest. Like people are just thinking about like if we can just achieve the Visa level scalability, we will done. We are fine. We won't be, right? The problem is that Visa just kind of supporting, or Visa or Mastercard or any payment system in Web2 is supporting simple transfers, and those transfers are also not the actual transfer. They are kind of mostly, you could say, settlement or retails, right? It's not like, for example, many people are using UPIs directly, not using Visa, and every countries have different kind of solutions of the wallets and PayPal and everything. So targeting just that won't cut it. Now the second issue is that if we think about like the many other L1 blockchains who are kind of saying, okay, we will achieve like thousands of TPS, it also not suffice for blockchain to scale, because we are now talking about NFTs, each NFTs and DeFi's and multiple other use cases on top of blockchains. Now, like people are building social networks on the blockchains, right? So for those things to achieve, we need to change our mindset of the blockchain scalability a little bit, and that's where ZK comes, right? Even with the ZK rollups, if you have like thousands of rollups running on the Ethereum or Avail and multiple other availability solutions, the problem, it will introduce more other problems. For example, composability, right? For example, how do you transfer your tokens from one chain to other rollup? Now, like I am hearing a more of a problem where people just sending a transactions on one chain to another chain and asking their fund is getting stuck because the Coinbase is not supporting that chain. All sort of problems will come once you have like multi-chain world, right? So now, like, it's not just like we just launched ZK rollups and every problem will get solved. That is just a starting point, and that's where we are focusing on. Like, even if we launch ZK rollups this year or maybe early next year, how end users will be able to use that, how their experience would look like, how bridge would behave, right? People don't have to kind of worry about like which chain their tokens are, or how do they move the tokens, what the security of the models, if some bridges gets hacked, how they would get their money out of that, right? So all the sort of problems, I think ZK Tech is so powerful that we can solve multiple problems using the technology. And I think scalability of ZK rollups is just one part of the ZK ZK power we are using for the scalability. And that's why, like, we are not just focusing or betting on the ZK rollups. We are basically betting on the ZK itself, because now, like, we have like multiple ideas on how to use ZK on the bridges, how to use ZK on the privacies, all sort of things, and slowly we're going to build it over the few years.
It's a very complex problem to solve, and it's one of the biggest and the most vulnerable attack points when it comes to cross-chain infrastructure and bridges, right? So it's very important to get these things right. Otherwise, you end up putting like a huge amount of value at risk.
Absolutely. And given we have three institutional investors here, right? One thing that I keep often hearing, good or bad, right or wrong, I would love you all to comment, is that a lot of institutional capital has been chasing more the tooling and the infrastructure side of Web3 now, right? I mean, whether it's development tools, whether it's platforms, whether it's studios and so on and so forth, right? So where's your head around funding that versus say the broader ecosystem? And is that true that there is a bias towards funding these kinds of plays today from institutions? Because at least that's the large perception we had when we surveyed a bunch of entrepreneurs and builders, right? So it seemed like everybody, this was the most common question. Why is it that there is a lot of bias from the institutional investors towards funding these kinds of initiatives?
So I'm not sure if buying, I don't know if investing in a blockchain development shop or a technology development shop or a studio, as a fund it's a little bit different. It's funny, I'm actually in the middle of acquiring a blockchain development shop at my parent. So I'm setting up a parent company, and they work on some of the projects that we have in the portfolio. So I felt like it would be smart for us to at least own that, but I didn't see it as a fund investment as much, because fund investments are usually you're looking for the 10x at least, right? So to me, it's more about picks and shovels there. I do see, though, we are actually invested into this blockchain gaming team, a group of teams, 11 teams, a big brand, had 9 billion impressions actually last year, because we think that they're going to be the ones that will help us find the right game investments also as part of our strategy with them. Because they're like mass adoption influencers, really, right? They're the pros. So we think that they're the ones that can bridge that gap. So what we do at our shop is we basically look for partnerships with other funds, investors, or groups that can help us find the right teams. I do think we did invest in a lot of the layer one protocol. We do believe that is, instead of buying NFTs, we buy the base product or the token or the equity in the companies that are creating the infrastructure, right? But again, we're in a chasm. So you're going to see some of those valuations on some of the bigger players are going to probably come down. And you will see some down rounds, I believe. So I think that right now, investing in a picks and shovels business is probably a good idea in a bear market. No matter how you do it, just in our fund, we are launching a venture fund right now. We're going to launch a venture fund because we think it's the best time to launch one. It'll be it's only our second fund. But the reason why is because I'm like, we need to be involved in the infrastructure play. The other thing I think is interesting is that there are some there are companies that are working closely with institutions and enterprise, what I would call more enterprise approaches. And I think that those people, those companies are pretty interesting from a blockchain development standpoint, like owning a piece of them, because they're working on the enterprise side outside of the cryptocurrency markets. So I'm kind of splitting hairs, but to me, I think you have to be really exact and fundamental as to where you're really looking at this. I think if you just say I'm going to invest in blockchain dev shops, I don't think that's a good idea. I would not do that. I think that you have to understand, why am I investing in that? Because a lot of these guys are open source. They're not really working at a dev shop. They're working at as decentralized infrastructure networks. I don't know if you can actually own the talent anymore. So I think you have to be very careful about trying to own talent in development groups, because they're very Web3 focused. They're freelancers. They're independent. They don't really want to be part of companies as much. So I would just be cognizant of that, because I think owning a people business is always a little bit more difficult.
So I think it's very important to understand the timing of where the technology is and which layer is ready to support the application layer, right? So when we look at the Web3 stack, we have on the bottommost, your layer 1 protocols, your settlement layers, and on top of that, you have the middleware layers, and on top of that, you have the application layer. Right now, we have just gotten to the stage where your middleware and your bottom layers have just starting to become mature and to support the throughput and the tooling required for the application layer to be built, right? And that's the same thing that happened in 2017. That whole crazy ICO rush that we saw, there were projects coming out who wanted to build the decentralized Uber in 2017, right? And you're talking about a time when Ethereum was not ready to support even CryptoKitties as a simple application, right? And the entire network was clogged. There was no layer 2 solutions there, and that layer was nowhere close to ready to scale. So we had just gotten to the very first stage where we can start to build applications that require the kind of throughput to bring in the users, right? So it was very important till now to support the infrastructure layer, because otherwise there wouldn't have been any application there. And now that we have gotten to the stage, you are going to see more and more of investments being done across the application category, right? And I think a lot of investors, including ourselves, have already started making some of those investments across, okay, which are the best application use cases? Obviously, how well do they understand on which underlying infrastructure or layer are they building on? Can it really support the kind of use case they are building for, right? So you are going to see more of that. Till now, the timing was not right. The timing was to get the infrastructure and the tooling right. Now that we have some of those basics in place which can support the application layer, I think now we'll start to see a shift across investments on the application side of things.
Himanshu, since you said that, and I think broadly the theme that seems to be resonating with all of us, and we are at a point where today the actual application layer builders need to be subject matter experts who are using the plumbing that crypto provides, rather than the blockchain engineers and so on and so forth, who are actually the plumbing providers to go start building what kindly has been called poor games, right? And it seems like the theme is now that is when the builders inside Web3 can also reach out to the subject matter experts outside to kind of start getting into newer projects that actually will perhaps start onboarding live use cases. And it seems from what we've been discussing this evening, we are about to start some of the early pilots in that, and us building everything from the inside in Web3 has not really been a smart idea in terms of application. So are we now, perhaps, would it be right to say that we are now kind of at the right time to make some of the institutional bets at that level? I mean, I think Enzo is saying that all of us seem to kind of agree and converge on that point that the time kind of seems to be okay or right to start these pilots. So is that a fair assessment of how we are moving, where we are at this moment, if I were to take a snapshot?
Yeah, I would definitely agree to that, because right now, over the last 12 months, obviously we saw a crazy amount of froth and hype in the market. But the good part about that is it really created more awareness among the entire population of the world, right? And what that has done is that has now started driving a lot of people from Web 2 into Web 3. And this class of new talent that is coming into Web3, they know how to build products for millions and billions of users, right? So now it's very well positioned where you have the infrastructure layer pretty much ready and the best of talent coming from Web 2, which knows how to get the users and how to build products for millions and billions of users. So I think that the timing, I think, is right, where we'll start to see a lot of these applications and use cases starting to emerge, starting to come in. And we are very keenly looking at a few of them. Just as an example, if I can share, we recently invested in this project called Fan Tiger. They're building a music NFT platform, and the CEO and the founder, Prashant, he's the ex-CEO of Ghana, right? And he knows exactly how to handle the artists and the music creators there, and how to scale that kind of a product to millions of users and fans, right? So we are starting to see the best of talent, which has already done that, now understanding why Web3 is better placed to help the creators and the content creators, and just remove the middlemen and the take rates which the Web2 platforms have had. So I think all of those things are adding up to build this next sort of generation of applications. But I really like the timing in terms of how these things are playing out.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think that what else you're going to see now is, so this is what I'm like from the TradFi or from the Web 2.0 world, right? So what I see is that a lot of people that I know are starting to, even in who's still in enterprise, the Deloittes of the world, KPMGs, like the big enterprise guys, that do, the Oracles, they're all implementing tech, and they're also actually getting involved to do more infrastructure plays. I would call it it's like boring fintech, like blockchaining, boring fintech stuff, right? But the interesting thing is that that's just attracting more kind of developers, because the developers are learning. It's like part of their toolbox. That's one. Two, I don't think we know who the winners are going to be, right? I think, Luna proves that, some of the biggest, ideas, this is going to keep on evolving. And I think that you're going to see additional breakthroughs as the tech becomes more mainstream. One of the biggest problems that we have in blockchain is scalability, right? And latency issues, right? That's probably if not the most, the number one problem that everyone is trying to solve is the latency issue and this idea of architecture. What I see when looking at watching these projects get developed, as a person who's been involved in fintech and building software in the markets, in Nasdaq and other companies like that, is a lack of architects, a lack of just engineers that understand distribution, because we're trying to do distribution with nodes and all this other stuff, and that's great, but it's a different infrastructure, and then plugging that infrastructure of blockchain decentralization into an architecture of just internet edge computing, or just managing like just middleware and the API issues, or bridging, or like, so I think now what we're going to start seeing is people hopefully more companies attempting to figure out the infrastructure scalability issue, which will then, and I don't know where it's going to come from, right? I know everyone's working on it, and that's great, and I don't know where it's going to actually come from, but I think that we're going to see some breakthroughs over the next couple of months or years, where right now we're hitting this wall. That wall has to be solved by people who understand edge computing, clustering, engineers. There's real hardcore technology, kind of engineers that understand mission critical systems and how to turn this into a mission critical system. Because the problem is, if it's centralized, it runs much more efficiently, right? We all know this. And as you start to decentralize, that's where the infrastructure issues come into play. And to me, that's an engineering problem more than a developer problem. And I just think that right now we have a lot of developers, we just don't have a lot of engineers.
That's a
I
fascinating.
love the way you think. I would add one thing, which is that, if I may, which is that I do believe that Terra and Luna was foreseeable. Many people, including Sino, for very long periods of time prior to the collapse of Terra and Luna, flagged algorithmic stablecoins as being fundamentally flawed concept, at least in most of their current implementations. So I would suggest that was in fact a foreseeable event. And I think it highlights, if I understood correctly, some of the important themes of what Enzo was saying just now, which is that in many ways we need are in great need of more sophisticated players entering the space on the engineering side, on the TradFi side. I think that's essential for us to move beyond some of our current flaws as an industry, such that we can have more mainstream adoption. I don't believe that, well, I'll leave it at that. I won't pick on Terra and Luna anymore.
Yeah, no, we agree with you. So we agreed, so a very simple like rationale. Why would I not own a stable coin that is backed by the actual kind of the collateralized asset, either T-bills or dollars or a combo. And why would I go into an algo one? Because it's decentralized. A stablecoin's idea is to be pegged to a dollar. The dollar is not decentralized. So why would you think that this is decentralized?
100%. 100%.
The rationale was so lacking to me that I was like, it's a cool little toy, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
It literally is a toy. So
Very strongly agree.
Yeah.
And I would actually. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I got too excited.
The concept of a stablecoin is to put something. The concept of a stablecoin is a fast way to get to dollars. Basically, that's what it should be.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So I don't have to wire it back and forth to the bank every 5 minutes. So why the hell would I want to use one that doesn't have any backing? That it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. And to me, that's just people getting Luna at a very cheap price, pumping the hell out of it, you know. And I'm not from that world. I'm from a regulated environment.
Exactly.
I'm just not that guy. So.
Yep, 100%. I don't think it would be possible for me to agree more strongly than I do with what you just said. And I would kind of add some context. So, I mean, we fundamentally believe in what we're investing in, which I think it's important to say that, because I'm not always super convinced that everyone investing and participating in crypto falls into that category. But with that said, there's kind of like a maximalist belief system, which is maximum decentralization for everything. That doesn't really make sense to me. We're very pragmatic in our view of what makes sense for technology and adoption and all those things. And in practice, then, we view decentralization as a continuum. And we're very early in this industry, but I would suggest that ultimately we will find that different applications are best suited to be at different places on that continuum. So some things, ultimately, we will, through a long process of experimentation, arrive at the conclusion that they should be extremely decentralized for X, Y, and Z reasons. And some things we will decide that both centralized and decentralization makes sense. You can have both models because of pros and cons and specific use cases and things like that. Or we might say that moderate decentralization is the optimal point. But then on the other hand, some things I think ultimately we will conclude, actually, this type of product should be mostly centralized. It should be USDC because that's what makes sense for ABC reasons. So we view it as a continuum. I think one of the reasons, I think there are multiple reasons why you had the Terra and why the industry enabled the Terra and Luna debacle. I think for sure, as Enzo astutely pointed out, one reason is that, you know, frankly, probably people were incentivized by low cost basis and they were pumping the hell out of it. I think too, though, is that there still are substantial maximalist strains in the industry where they view decentralization as something where fundamentally we should always turn the dial to maximum for kind of ideological reasons. I do not subscribe to that.
Well, so,
we're all extremely passionate, so let's kind of continue this discussion online. I think we can go on for the next couple of hours. But there are a lot of the reason I'm saying that is I'm going to take the liberty of extending and giving you the punishment for all these conversations by requesting you all to be participating in this for the next 10 minutes. We have a bunch of audience questions that we've curated, so I would like to get to the audience questions now, and I would kindly request all the panelists, if they don't mind, if you could just continue for the next 10-15 minutes, if that's okay.
Sure thing.
Right, great, thank you. And so a lot of questions from multiple builders. I'm not going to go over them again individually, but ideally, I think it's still same classic question, right? I'm doing this project. Should I launch a token? Should I take equity? Right. And I think that seems to be a repetitive question from multiple founders we've had even this evening, right? I see at least 4 or 5 questions along the same lines, right? I'm doing this project. How do I really think about this? Should I do a token? Should I take equity? What should I do? Right? And if somebody were to start thinking as a builder, as a developer in this, where do they go? I mean, there are enough resources to look at.
I think the number one thing that you have to ask yourself is, why do I need a token economy? If you're going to launch a token, don't launch a token, just launch a token. Let's just ask yourself that question. Is your idea, your startup, your concept does it require a token economy, and does it require your own? Or should you be using, or are you part of another, should you be using another network or another token that is doing something similar to what you're trying to do? And actually create a real ecosystem around a specific token versus trying to just raise, because raising capital via the token, you got to ban US investors, right? We have an offshore group and everything, but the thing is that and then on the equity side, I like the token side because to me it's a bit of a carrot and a stick. It's like being in the public markets a bit, right? I can also I get more information when they have a token because they're a little bit more like a public. They have to deal with their token holders, so it keeps entrepreneurs, I think, a little bit more on their toes. But at the same time, I also recognize that it's good to have a little bit of quietness, be able to focus and build your product and not be being, basically dealing with the public face of the token side. So I would just say just whenever, when that's the first question I always ask is, could you do this without a token, and why are you doing it? It's like a great use case for a token, right? Is helium, pollen, the decentralized coverage of 5G and IoT across the world, and paying people in a tokenized cryptocurrency or whatever token that has value for literally helping to build out the 5G networks, because the telecom companies can't afford to put 5G everywhere. It's just too capital intensive. It's too difficult owning the real estate and all that stuff. So this to me is a fantastic use case that can only be solved with decentralization and blockchain. It's impossible to get 5G all over the world without it. So I think those are or IoT, those are the types of things like you need a token for that, right? So that's what I would ask. I would ask yourself, why are you forming a token?
Himanshu, I'm sure that you're getting the same question a lot of times. So what would your recommendation on how they should think be?
Yeah, so I think as Enzo said, the first question is to ask, why do you need a token? And then it's very important to understand what are you building and who are your stakeholders, right? Who are the different stakeholders in the use case that you are building, and study about the different type of token models that are there, right? What kind of different token utilities exist? Are you trying to build something that might require a gas token? Are you building something which might require a payment token? Are you building something where you can incentivize users through a different discount mechanisms, etc.? So I would suggest study the use case that you are building and who are the different stakeholders, and within your stakeholders, who is it most likely to use your token, right? Eventually, who is going to buy because there's an organic demand for it. And on the second hand, break it down in terms of what are the different token utilities that exist, why do people create tokens based on different utilities, and where exactly does your use case require any of those utilities. So that way you'll get a better idea if there is a need for a token or not in the first place. And if there is no clear need, start the traditional route, go the traditional route, build the use case, get the users, and you can keep trying to figure it out, the token story data. Don't rush into it, because once you launch a token and go down the token route, there's no coming back, right? It's not like you can shut it down. You'll probably end up going into a situation where you have launched the token and eventually involved retail customers who will end up losing money on the project. So don't rush into it till you have complete clarity on that.
My own approach also has been, when I've been approached by entrepreneurs, is that, hey, if you are launching a token, think about this, right? Are you willing to hand over what you're building to the community? At some point, do you see that your equity value is tending to zero if you were to take equity, right? And is the value accruing through the network, to the network, and to the community? And if that answer is a yes, perhaps down the road, you need to go to a token economy, start with equity, recompensate your equity holders with token, but get your equity down to zero, right? And honestly, unless you're looking at that kind of network effects and decentralization and community ownership, which is perhaps an order of magnitude of lower than all the projects that launch, or even lower, perhaps a couple of orders of magnitude, then don't even think about doing a token for the sake of doing a token. Like I said, it can quickly tend to become a distraction, as you rightly said, Himanshu. I think I'm on the same lines of thought here. Let's go on to the next question. There are questions from a couple of family offices here saying, how do we now start participating in funds? I think that sentiment is opening up. I see more and more family offices getting willing to participate in that. I think there's Vatsala here who's asked this question, and that's a question that's starting to resonate with family offices. How do we start making investments in crypto funds, right? Or how do we get started? So, and what are you all doing? I mean, are you seeing interest from family offices now wanting to participate in the asset class? What's going on there?
No, I was just going to say, so we actually have research. So we publish research on companies in this space. We stay a little bit far away from macro research because there's so many people doing macro crypto research. So we look at companies, and this is how we had the 11 unicorn type thing, where we identified companies early and we wrote about them. We had bought them from we would buy tokens or equity from the company, or we would, in some cases, I know that we bought it on the open market, but we would write why. We would say, this is why we think this company is, and when we would do like a DCF model. So you can always join our research and go to our site. It's alphasigma.fund/research. There's like an application. You have to apply. We do KYC. We don't KYC you, like ask you for your passport, but we KYC you. We want to talk. We want to make sure that you're not just taking our research for whatever reason. We want to know like really kind of who you are. So, and we have about 4,000 family offices and funds that follow us, and some very well-known people, which I don't name, but they're very well-known people in the industry, top of the food chain. And, we share it that way. And then, of course, we're setting up funds. But I'm like, if you just want to read the way if you want to learn about how we think, you can read it. You can read. And they're like 3 pages. They're like written like sell-side equity research reports, because we're TradFi guys also. So we kind of write it in a way that we try to make it as simple as possible and not get too academic or get too kind of onerous on the calculations. And it's independent research. The companies don't pay for it. We pay for it ourselves. It's not like it's not a fluff piece. It just says, this is what the company does. This is why we think it's going to work. This is why we think it's not going to work.
I love it.
Go, and just read it. So.
I love it. I'm definitely signing up for that myself.
Yeah,
and we have a GitHub where we have open sourced our research. So we have our investment theses, why we invested in FTX so early, why we invested in Polygon recently. Our most recent unicorn is Layer 0, why we invested in Layer 0, things like that. So if you Google search Sino Global Capital GitHub, it'll come up. And we have outsourced our investment theses, as well as a book we wrote, How to Solana, which is an overview of the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah, so what I would start by saying is, I don't think anyone here would disagree that there is definitely, one is timing is probably right in terms of investing when the markets are cooling down. So that I don't think is a question of concern anymore. And I think we have gotten past the stage where most people used to look at crypto as a speculative asset class. Right now, it's about really a question about figuring out what your alternate asset investment strategy is. And but I think for family offices, it becomes very important to when we talk about noise in the crypto space, it's not only noise on the project side, there's a lot of noise on the fund side as well, right? There are so many funds that have emerged over the last 1 or 2 years, etc. And unfortunately, many of them tend to be spray and pray funds. And obviously, because the whole space has gone berserk, a lot of them get lucky and have returns to show for. So to navigate through that, my recommendation for the family offices would be to probably do two things. One is to see which funds have specific geographical advantage in terms of the network that they have and the deal flows access that they have built. And second is to actually go to the extent of talking to their portfolio companies and the founders to see what do those funds provide as service and value addition to the companies that they work with. And I'm pretty sure if you do that, you'll be able to cut down on most of the noise that exists in the market, because there are very few serious funds who focus on, who have a long-term mindset about the space and who actually work hands-on with their portfolio companies in terms of the value they are providing. So if you're trying, as a family office, if you're trying to navigate through the crypto fund space, I think that's a exercise that's worth the effort, where you'll probably you'll be able to find out which are some good funds out there that are worthy of probably working with or investing in.
And perhaps if I can request 256 team, Drew, I'm going to take the liberty of requesting the team to maybe reach out to those from our LP community and our family office communities if they need any of the information or access to the resources that Enzo, Himanshu, or Matthew have provided here. Please do reach out to Drew or 256 team, and we'd be happy to curate all these resources and provide that to you, even if whether you're an LP or whether you're a family office. Please do reach out to us. And I'm taking the liberty, Drew, of saying that because that might be a right time also that we bring this discussion to a close. And perhaps if there is enough interest in our groups, please do reach out to Drew to be part of this community, and maybe there are enough LPs interested. We could do an exclusive session for our LPs too. I mean, it seems like there might be some interest. So please do reach out to, again, Team 256 for the next event in Web3. And I think we are all committed in doing this together, building this together. And one of the reasons we started the 256 Web3 Club was this too. So with that, Drew, I'll hand over to you for any concluding remarks. And
I think, thank you so much, Vineeth, Enzo, Matt, and Himanshu for joining. Of course, JD and Kunal had to drop out. So, but I think this is something very interesting, and this is something we've been building last couple of months, and we thought let's announce it because our club is mostly LP and GP oriented, but we have these small sector focused clubs under the main LP-GP clubs, where Web3 is where you get high-end operators and investors to get under one roof and then figure out what conversations come out of the closed door groups. So that was the only intent here. Cool. Thank you so much, guys. Enzo, Matt, Himanshu, Vineeth, and everyone in the audience. Thank you so much for joining us.